Hey everyone. God, it's been a minute since I've done a video. What has it been? Since like 2012, 13, somewhere around there. But I have a functioning laptop again, so I'm back, kind of, except I may never do one of these again. Who knows? I just feel inspired. So I am here to talk your ear off about things that you probably don't care to hear about again. This time, I wanted to talk about something that was inspired by recent events in my life, just kind of an issue that I've always thought about and always had concerns with, but it resurfaces every now and then as things change in my life. And recently, the last month or so, I've been unemployed. And I just got a new job. And getting this new job and going through the employment process and all of the stuff that goes into that has kind of resurfaced these thoughts and these ideas. And that is on the topic of the invasion of privacy. Mostly with companies, I'm going to be talking about right now. So for me, I've always been very opposed to my privacy being invaded, even when I was little. And while privacy and freedom, in the sense of, say, anarchy and government, go hand in hand for me, they are separate issues. Even before I was an anarchist, before I was all anti-authority, when I was really little, I didn't like having my privacy invaded. And an example would be that my parents used to monitor my internet activity with this program called NetNanny. And even when I wasn't doing anything bad, just seeing that little pop up there made me so angry to know that I was being watched, that, my information and my activities were not my own, they were not private, that I had to share them with somebody. And that always pissed me off, and it's still, to this day, I hate having my privacy invaded. I absolutely can't stand it. I don't like people looking at my phone or, going through my computer without my permission. It bothers me very, very much. And I think companies are a huge perpetrator of this. And you may disagree with me, or you may think that, companies are right in what they do in regards to invasion of privacy, and that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But I'm going to talk about why I think it's not okay and why I think it doesn't work. And I've seen this in almost every company I've been with, except for maybe a couple of the more casual jobs like Hot Topic and Wendy's. They didn't really care about any of this. But every other company that I've been with has massively invaded my privacy. And I just have to deal with it because obviously I need a job, and it's not like I can just be like, I'm not taking a job because you're invading my privacy. No, I need the money. So it's the one instance where I have to deal with it, even though it irks me so bad. So let me start off by saying that I don't think it's right for companies to invade people's privacy. Let me make that clear from the get-go. I don't think it's any of a company's business to get into the lives of their employees. Now, let me give you some examples. One of the best examples that I can think of, and this actually was something that I faced with a job that I had had in the past, is that companies recently, and I say recently as in within the last decade, because, previously, before technology had flourished as much, it wasn't an issue. Not recently as in super recently. Companies have taken to using social media to spy on their employees. Companies are going and looking at your Facebook, looking at your Tumblr, looking at how you present yourself on the internet. And I can't help but sit here and think, how the hell is that any of this company's business? How is it in any way their right to go and poke around in my personal information, in my personal life, and look at the things that I do online? How is that even okay for a company to do that? And I'll tell you how. It's because we as a culture have gotten so used to just doing what we're told and obeying the government and obeying our jobs that nobody ever resisted it. As soon as it became a thing where companies were like, yeah, we're going to look at your Facebook, nobody stood up and said, no, you're not. Everybody was just like, oh, okay, I guess they're doing this now. Guess we better be careful how we act online. But I think it's bullshit. I think it's so unacceptable that a company has the right to go prod around in your personal life. And I think this is more so the case because It's work and your personal life are completely separate. They're completely different environments, completely different mental states when you're at work and when you're in your personal life. In fact, most companies' policies and most companies' trainers, they will tell you in training and in the company policy that you are to leave your personal life at the door. When you walk into work, you leave your personal life at the door. They don't want you coming to work worrying about what your best friend Kathy said to you yesterday, or worrying about your kid flunking out of school, or worrying about the fight you had last night with your husband. They don't want you worrying about any of that when you're at work, because you're at work. And that's literally part of the company policy. So my thinking is, if I'm supposed to leave my personal life at the door when I come to work and separate personal and work, then why does it even matter for a company to go look at my social networking? If that's supposed to be separate from work anyway, why do they care what I do on Facebook, what I post on my Tumblr, or what emails I send to people? How is that relevant to them if that is all stuff I'm supposed to be leaving at the door when I come to work anyway? It's not. It's not relevant to them. They're just looking for a reason to weed out people they don't like. It is straight up judgmental. There is no practical purpose to a company going and looking at somebody's Facebook profile. Because when somebody comes to work, they're going to be a completely different person. They're going to be acting differently, functioning differently, thinking differently than they would in their personal life. And because of that, it completely doesn't matter what that person does in their personal life. It doesn't affect work. And so I don't think it's acceptable for a company to go and invade that. And another good example that falls in kind of the same line as that is background checks. Now, I don't completely disagree with background checks. I think the criminal background portion is important because a company probably should know if you just got out of prison a month ago for killing 4 people. A company probably should know if you were arrested back in 2011 for pulling a gun at work and threatening everybody that you were going to shoot them if you didn't get a $20 raise or something. You know, a company has the right to know if you've done some violent, horrible things because that pertains to their safety and all of their employees' safety. And when it comes to something like that, then yeah, that's acceptable. But I think it should stop there. I think the background check should stop at criminal background. But it doesn't. They go in and they look at your work history and they see why you've left different jobs, and they'll hold it against you if you've been fired from other jobs. And they'll also hold it against you, for example, if you've had too many jobs. Like if you've had 10 jobs in the past 2 years, they'll go, oh, why have you had so many jobs? Well, why the fuck do you care why I've had so many jobs? Maybe I've just been feeling the waters and trying to find something that was right for me. Why is it any of your business how many jobs I've had? And I know that you'll say, okay, well, it's because they want to see if you're going to be committed to the company. But I think that should be a matter of what happens next, not what has happened before, because there can be any number of reasons why somebody may have stayed in or left a job. And I don't think it's fair for a company to even use that information to determine how a person is going to be at their current position. And another thing background checks look at that makes even less sense to me than the employment history is they look at living history, like where you've lived. They go and they find every address you've been at. And I'm like, how is this information any of your business? Why do you care where I have lived in the past? I live here now and I'm trying to work here now. So why do you care if I lived in Mexico 2 years ago? You know, it's just completely asinine that they even look at such things, but they go to every length to look at every detail about you to make sure that you're a good fit for the company instead of just letting you perform and see how you do. And, you know, I'll be honest, I hate it. It drives me insane. And it didn't used to be that way. It didn't. And I know this because I've had conversations with my parents. And I think it was my father specifically that I was having a conversation with once. And I was talking about background checks and companies like looking at your information on a computer. And, you know, because I'd had a company one time that not only did they look at my social networking, but they also monitored everything I was doing on my computer while I was at work, which I guess would be fine if all I was doing was work. But this was a company that told me, oh, yeah, you're allowed to access personal emails and social media and YouTube and that sort of thing when you're not on a call. Okay, well, if that's the case, then you should probably stay the hell out of my computer. Like, if I'm accessing my personal emails and my Facebook, I don't want your nosy ass sitting there looking at what I'm doing. And this company totally did. They monitored everything. And not only did they, like, record internet website history and monitor that, they also had the right to remotely access my computer and see live what I was doing on my computer. And it was just so infuriating. And I told my dad about it once, and he told me, you know, back when I was working, before we had all the computers and Facebook and all of that stuff, your boss left you alone. Nobody was being nosy and poking into your business. If you came to work and at the end of the day your output was what it was expected to be, your boss left you alone. He wasn't going down your throat about what you do in your personal life. He wasn't standing there saying, you need to submit your background check because we need to know all about you. No, they would check on your criminal history, make sure you weren't a criminal, and then they'd say, come to work. And if you did your job, you got left alone. Nobody was invading your privacy and monitoring every little thing you do, breathing down your neck like, oh, are you doing your job right? You better be doing your job right. They didn't do that. And I thought that was so cool that it used to not be that way, that it hasn't always just been shitty, invasive companies. But it is now, and I think that's unfortunate. I think that we are using technology for the wrong things. Technology is great, and it does allow us to have more insight into things than we did before, but I don't think that technology should be used to invade people's privacy. I don't think that it should be used to analyze every aspect of their life when you don't even know this person. You're just hiring them for a job. You know, I don't think that's fair or acceptable. And one of the biggest examples of invasive companies that I just really am opposed to is drug testing. And some of you may grind your teeth at me and like, oh no, drugs, bad. And in some cases I'll agree. Like, I'm very opposed to certain hard drugs such as amphetamines and cocaine and that sort of thing, that I'm like, okay, people really need to, you know, watch themselves on that. If they still want to do that, then sure, but they really need to be careful with it, because those are very harsh things that are very addictive and habit forming and can ruin people's lives. But I'm still opposed to drug testing, at least pre-employment. During employment, it's a little bit more understandable because, you know, if you catch an employee with drugs on them at work or doing drugs at work, or if, say, an employee's performance is faltering and they're not doing well and you suspect it may be due to drug use, then I think it's okay to, you know, insist that they pass a drug test in order to continue employment, especially if you work in an industry where it may be unsafe to be intoxicated on any kind of drug. Like, you know, say you were a crane operator and you're heaving giant heavy objects over dozens of workers down below you. It's probably not a good idea for you to have a joint in your mouth while you're doing that. You know, chances are you're not going to pay attention and you're going to drop that giant piece of metal onto 12 workers below you. So I think during employment, it's okay to do a drug test if somebody is reasonably suspected of using drugs on the job. But I think pre-employment drug tests are so shady. They're so invasive and just like, how is it any of your business? Because I see it the same way as what we were talking about with the personal life. I think most people, maybe not all, I'm sure there are people out there that are totally gonna, you know, snort 4 lines of cocaine and then go to work. I'm sure there's people like that. But I would say that most people are probably, just as with their personal life, going to leave any drug use at the door when they come to work. They're going to come to work and they're going to be sober and they're going to do their job. And they're going to go home and then they're going to smoke a bowl of weed or whatever they want to do to, you know, relax at the end of the day and help them feel better from the stress of the day. But they're going to perform fine at work and they're going to leave that at the door. I think that would probably be the case for most people. And so I think pre-employment drug screening is just so invasive. because I don't think it's really any of the company's business what substance a person puts into their body until that substance starts to affect their work performance. Before it's affecting their performance, I don't think it's any of their business, because it's not affecting them. It's not impacting them in any way. And you might say, oh, well, it allows companies to go and look and go, okay, well, this person's on all of these drugs, so we're not going to hire them because it's, we want to preempt their poor work performance and just not hire somebody who isn't going to perform well. Well, I would counter that with saying that I know a lot of people who use drugs. And, I have known many people all throughout my life who have used different drugs. And many of the people that I have known who have had some sort of drug use in their life are very hard workers. They're very diligent. When they go to a job and they go to work, they work their ass off. They do everything they can to make sure the job gets done right, and they're diligent and they're adamant because they have bills to pay, just like everybody else does. So they go to work and they perform exceptionally well. So no, I don't think a company is preempting poor work performance by doing a pre-employment drug screen. I think what they're doing is actually hindering themselves. They're passing up potentially amazing employees just because maybe that person likes to, shoot it up when they get home or smoke a bowl. Why does that matter to a company unless it's being brought into work? Because it's not affecting that person. See what I'm saying? And I just think, the whole drug screen process in general is just so invasive and so not cool for companies to be doing. Unless somebody's performance is affected, it shouldn't matter what they do with their life outside of work. None of that should be a company's business, not just with the drugs, not just with their social networking, but I think with everything. I don't think there is a single thing about a person's lifestyle, at-home choices, social life, or any of that should be any of a company's business unless those things start affecting work. You could use, video games as an example. No company is looking at somebody who plays video games and saying, you play video games, so you can't work here because you might be distracted. Now, if somebody starts bringing games to work and that's all they do and they forget to do their actual job because they're sitting there on their Nintendo DS or something playing games, then sure, yeah, then it becomes relevant to the company because it's affecting that person's performance. And then they have the right to be like, hey, you play video games, so you can't work here anymore. Sure. And, I think that applies to everything in somebody's life. Nobody should have their life invaded by some company just to see if they're going to be a good employee. Because if you ask me, there is no way to tell if that person's going to be a good employee based on any of those things. A person could have been fired from 8 different jobs because they performed horribly. But maybe they've reformed. Maybe they've been fired 8 times and now they've gone, okay, you know what, maybe I should stop screwing around and work really hard because I have a wife and kids and I have bills to pay. So if a company were to go and look and be like, oh, you were fired from 8 jobs, so we're not hiring you, well, tough luck. You just passed up an amazingly hard worker because they changed. I don't think any of that information can determine whether or not somebody's a good employee. I think the only thing that can determine if somebody is a good employee is them coming to work and showing if they're a good employee. But companies have started using technology and started using, monitoring systems and drug screens and background checks and all of this stuff to invade people's lives. And I don't think it's okay. And I don't think most of us would think it's okay when we really get down to it. I think anybody who really knows about, human nature should know that nobody deserves to have their life invaded and nobody deserves to have that kind of privacy infringed. But it doesn't change. And it's because people don't resist it. Like I mentioned earlier, we've gotten to a culture where we just let the authoritative figures do what they want. Everybody needs to open their eyes to things like this and go, you know what, this really isn't cool, this really isn't okay. And if enough people look at it, see that it's not okay, and stand against it and say, we're not going to put up with this, over time, change will occur. That's how every major change has been made in history. Well, maybe not every, but many of them have been masses of people deciding they weren't okay with something and standing up against it. That's all it takes. So, resist the power, my friends.